It's the Jim and Terry Show without my good friend Jim, still for another podcast, diving into things that are contentious in the Christian fundamentalist evangelical camp. Talking today about another issue, this time a pastor, Grace Community Church, John MacArthur, someone who in my fundamentalist days, my own personal evangelical days, I would have listened to in tape-recorded messages, yes, predating CDs. I would have listened to live on a Christian radio station on a drive to and from someplace, maybe a Sunday morning. So this is a little strange for me, but it requires looking at the process of what Christians would call restoration. When someone within the community of believers in your local association, your local church, believes that they have been wronged or in some way grieved by someone else, and the word sin comes up, there is a victim of the sin. There is a perpetrator of the sin. And the Christian community usually is looking at ways to resolve this thing internally, without going to the courts, without going to the police. And in a previous podcast, I alluded that much of the abuse that goes on in a Christian context is never reported, will never see the light of day because of the Christian concept and belief in the efficacy of the restorative process. And that's that you take the person who is the perpetrator and perhaps like an indigenous circle, a restoration circle, you find out the details and you sort of adjudicate using what they would advocate are biblical principles of restoration. You would have the confession accepted and a policy of how you move forward agreed upon. The elders would be involved in the process. The pastor would be involved in the process. And somehow the outcome would be restorative, that the community which was broken by a sin perpetrated on an individual member of that community, that circle is now restored, that somehow all is made well and forgiven. All right, what do you do when that stuff breaks down? And what do you do if the church itself is the perpetrator? Or at least that the leadership level of a church are the perpetrators, are the enablers, are the ones who are guilty of the sin. What should happen then? And we talked about the spiritual advisor to Donald Trump who came out as a pedophile and what should be done now. So he's stepping down from church leadership. Gateway Community Church was that one. Like, what? Why is that being swept under the carpet? Why is there no legal ramification for that 12-year-old victim? I'm not sure any of this stuff makes any sense, but it stinks. Do you know the biblical phrase that when God is offended by injustice, it stinks in God's nostrils? Well, I'm not sure that I'm one who believes that God has a nose or that he is offended by injustice because it keeps on going on within a Christian context. I'm not saying I know the details of how frequently. It'd be worth a deep dive, a study. And perhaps that's a topic for another investigation. How frequently does abuse get hidden within a church association, a denomination? Are there some denominations that are more secretive and guarded and hide sins more often? Are Mormons guilty of stuff and bury it more? Are evangelicals, Anglicans, Baptists? Who does it? Catholics, goodness knows we had that big revelation about the number of kids, males, boys who were abused, and the bishop, and I believe it was in the Boston area, was investigated and got off. No criminal charges, relocated. Isn't that what churches often do? At least the Catholic Church is known for that process. When you've got a wayward minister, You relocate them, put them in Timbuktu or some other very remote location where what? Where there are less people to perpetrate more? You put them in a less dense population so they're less likely to offend again? What kind of restoration is that? You're just removing the perpetrator and putting them in a new location where they can do it again, where the sins of the past will never find you out, or so they believe. All right, well, this one is about John MacArthur and about calling out publicly in a church service. And although it is an older incident, it has recently come out, and I'm not sure why it's coming out now, but the article that I read was 2023. There is a reporter who is, I would have thought she was within the Christian community. If I have her name, how about Julie Royce? You can look her up. Maybe I'll put a link in the description. But she is now being cast out of what? The evangelical community, the fundamentalist community, the people who are the conservatives within the community of faith. What's her big crime? She reported on John MacArthur not believing the woman. How often have we heard this? The E. Jean Carroll trial with Donald Trump, believe the woman. How about the Weinstein case? Believe the women. Believe the victims. Yes or no? Well, even in the church, the answer seems to be no. And it seems to be that patriarchy, that's a male system. That's the way it goes. Grin and bear it. Women have no rights. Women should be what? The trad wife. Seen, not heard. Children, seen, not heard. And old white guys in leadership seem to know better than anybody else. Nah, not on your life. So that's where this is all going. Julie Royce is a reporter. And she has reported on the story, and I believe it was just, here's an article. The new story about John MacArthur shows why we need, and it goes on to talk about why we need some better policies in church leadership. He's accused of sending an abused woman back to her abuser of a husband who not just molested her, sexually abused her, physically abused her, but the kids. And John MacArthur, did he know, is the fuzzy way that conservatives are looking at that. Of course he didn't know, otherwise he would have acted. No, I don't think so. So much gets buried under the carpet of restoration and the restorative process because that's what Christians are taught to practice and believe. Grace Community Church rejected the elders' call. This is in Christianity Today, just February 2023. So it's been brewing for months now, and it's still echoing. There are so many things that you can go to check out the ugly truth behind MacArthur. Okay, so yeah, he has fallen from grace in my estimation. And when you do this, there is no excuse for any of this. So he calls out this woman in a public service, apparently. And that was just the beginning of it. And this went on for a while, that she was being coerced by the church leadership to return to her husband. Traditional Christian theology. Restore, return, heal and mend. But there was none. There was no healing and mending, and just a sweeping under the carpet. And that's where things get dicey. When Christians claim to have a two-tier judicial system. Have you heard that before? Trump claiming that they're picking on me. Why is everybody always picking on me? Charlie Brown. Yeah, the old song is still true. So we have an issue. The issue is of the restorative process when there is sin in the church and how it should be dealt with. And I'm not sure that you should keep it within the church or keep it on the QT. Keep it quiet. Hush, hush. I don't want anybody to be offended. How many times are we going to read stories about Christians in leadership, youth pastors committing assault, committing crimes against victims, young kids? And now we hear this about women in the church being told to put up and shut up. What? That seems to be conservative community church mentality these days. One article that is interesting to approach this thing is called Pride and Preaching. When your pride, too big to fail, Grace Community Church. Too big to fail, Gateway Community Church. Too big to fail in a Christian context where you don't want to call out the sin because your revenue stream might be jeopardized, the offerings might go down, people might leave. Yeah, truth has a way of having that kind of impact. And maybe that's what needs to happen. People should experience the consequences for their decisions and choices. That's what happens to all of us when we speed, when we don't wear seatbelts, when we have an accident. We pay the consequences for all of these things. They're not errors in judgment, as the pastor from the Gateway Church said. It was an error in judgment. No, it wasn't. It was raping. It was victimizing children. It was child abuse. It was pedophilia. Don't sweep it under the carpet with your euphemisms. Euphemisms, kind ways of saying things. No, the harsh reality is call it what it is. Trump is an adjudicated rapist, and that needs to be said. He's a convicted felon. Yeah, call it like it is. We're in the church or outside of the church. No two-tier justice for whoever you are, in the church or outside of the church. Look it up. The John MacArthur controversy, Grace Community Church, and the reporter who's spilling the beans on it, Julie Royce. Conservatives don't like her. I wonder why. Jim and Terry Show signing off. Bye-bye for now.